Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee is our 10:30 panel with the State's Attorney's Office and the Sheriff's Department. I am joined to my right by Councilman Robert Stokes from the 12th. To his right, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council from the 6th District, Councilman Brandon Scott from the 2nd District, Council President Jack Young, and then directly to my right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. Kara Kuntz from the Council President's Office is somewhere, and representing the mayor is Karan Banks. When you guys are talking, if you could please just talk into the mic because this is being streamed live on TV. If I politely interrupt you and ask you to talk into the mic, that's why. What we're going to do is start off with a brief presentation from both agencies. Sheriff, if you could go first. And please keep your presentation, if you could keep your presentation, I know the state's attorney has more content to present. If you could keep your presentation at about 5 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to Madam State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby. Thank you for joining us today. We're also joined by Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District. We're not going to get started until the Budget Director joins us. He must have been doing something more important, but he's here with us now. Thank you very much for joining us again, Mr. Klein. Also joined by Councilman Chris Burnett from the 8th District and Councilman Leon Pinkett, Vice Chair of the Committee from the 7th District. Sheriff, if you could take, and feel free to sit down or go up to the podium, whatever you guys feel more comfortable with.
Thank you and good morning. It's my honor to be here to present the Sheriff's Office budget presentation today. I'm going to go through the main functions of the Sheriff's Office just briefly, and then I can answer any questions anyone may have. Service 881 is our court security function. That's our most high-profile function that we have. We maintain facility security of 3 buildings, which are the Juvenile Justice Center when courts are in session, the Circuit Court East Building, and the Circuit Court West Building. And we provide all the policing services within those buildings as well as the courtroom security. That is a full-service division, and that is Service 881. 882 is our Deputy Sheriff Enforcement. These are the deputy sheriffs that are out in the street. They are performing warrant apprehension, they are performing civil attachments, and they are performing civil service. That is Service 882. Within that service, we also have our training department, our internal affairs department, and our human resource department. Service 883 is our protective order and peace order services. So the Sheriff's Office serves all protective orders and peace orders that are issued out of the Circuit Court and the District Court of Maryland. That is a unit that runs 7 days a week, and we serve those orders throughout the city of Baltimore and assist other jurisdictions that forward their orders where people live into the city of Baltimore. Service 884 is our District Court division. That division serves evictions and foreclosures and post-process that's issued from the rent court mainly, but also from the District Court of Maryland that needs sheriff enforcement. That is a full-service unit, and that runs Monday through Friday is when we're performing evictions and foreclosures, usually between the hours of 9 and 12. We serve process through that at other hours. 889 is our child support division. That division staffs the child support courtroom. It goes out and serves child support summonses and subpoenas, and it also arrests people on child support warrants. That unit is propped up budgetarily by a $1.2 million reimbursement agreement that we have with the State Department of Child Support Enforcement. And that is a basic summary of our main services as you'll see it in the budget. Our budget this year is current level service, and it has been current level service for several years now.
Thank you very much, sir. We've been joined by Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District.
Chairman, for being late.
That's okay. The only one required to be here on time is the Budget Director. And Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District.
Thanks again.
Madam State's Attorney.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Council President, as well as council members. We in the State's Attorney's Office are also operating at current level services. Despite a spike in crime that we've clearly see all across the city, my prosecutors last year prosecuted over 44,000 cases, the year before 50,000 cases, and even despite that increase, we still have a 92% felony conviction rate. From 2014 to 2015, in on top, and despite of the fact that we increased the homicide levels by more than 20%, we have an 80% conviction rate. When we talk about the administration, and we'll talk more, and Camille Blakefall, who is the Chief of Administration, will do the presentation for the council with regard to our budget. But I wanted to just briefly highlight some of the things that we believe are essential and we want to point out to the council. We have been fiscal stewards. Last year, we ended our budget with a surplus. We successfully defended state funding for 3 years in a row, despite their recommendation that they decrease our funding and put that on the heels of the city council or municipalities. We launched several programs without the support of any sort of city funds. So when we talk about the Aim to Be More program, we talk about the Great Expectations program, where we go into the schools in West Baltimore and focus on fourth graders, community days in court, where we partnered with the Sheriff's Department, open up the doors of the courthouse to the community and talk about the intricacies of the criminal justice system. Or again, the Aim to Be More program for first-time nonviolent felony drug offenders. We've initiated these programs without any use of city funds. Clearly, and we'll get further into this, the Victim Witness Services is a paramount sort of issue, and the number one sort of priority for the state's attorney's office. We cannot prosecute our cases, and I've said this time and time again. We can't police our way out of it. We can't prosecute our way out of it. Clearly, my special victims unit has a 97% conviction rate without the community. And so it's really important for us, from a victim witness service perspective, to be able to provide services for our victims and witnesses of crime, because we can't make a case without them. So understanding and recognizing, and this is something that I do want to highlight again for the council, there has been a more than 79% increase in the victims and witnesses that we've served in the past 2 years, and our funding is not in line with that. We've only increased the funding by more than 4%. We have a 79% increase in those that we are servicing. However, we don't have the funds in order to do that. Last year, you'll note, and I sat down with a number of you individually and explained that we overspent when it comes to victim relocation more than $218,000. And in an attempt to be fiscally responsible, we made a request of over $829,000. The majority of that was for victim witness relocation. Unfortunately, that was not granted to us. However, we have gone out and sought additional resources, and recognizing that it shouldn't just fall on the city. We've increased the grant funding by more than 27%. As you all are well aware, we got a $2.4 million federal grant for victim witness services in the home of witness intimidation, where the Stop Snitching mentality began. And however, these grant funds are not sustainable, and it's something that we have to consider when we think about the number of folks that we want to come forward and to make our community safe. We can't make these cases without them. So those are some of the numbers that we're going to highlight. I would now turn it over to my Chief of Administration, Camille Blakefall.
We've been joined by Councilman John Bullock from the 9th District. There you are, sir. The 9th District.
Good morning, Council. Let me get our slides, and thank you, Madam State's Attorney, for that introduction. Again, my name is Camille Blakefall. I'm the Chief of Administration, and I'm going to, we're a little bit out of order, but we'll start here. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to address the Council regarding our office's FY18 budget. The State's Attorney's Office's budget for FY18 maintains the current level of spending, totaling $43,996,812. It's an increase of just 1.2 from the FY17 budget, which totaled $41,862,283. The 1.2% increase is the result of a COLA, cost of living adjustment, and a general benefits inflation, so to account for the inflation for the cost of health care and other fringe benefits. Our budget is divided into 3 service areas. Service 1, or Service 115, is for the prosecution of criminals, Service 781 for administration, and finally Service 786 for victim and witness services. I'll start at the slide in front of you. Under prosecution of criminals, our office, along with our partners in law enforcement, investigates and prosecutes all criminal cases occurring in Baltimore City. As Madam State's Attorney highlighted, the prosecution of criminals is our office's primary mission and accounts for 79% of our annual budget. In 2016, the state's attorney's office prosecuted over 44,000 cases, and since 2015, the average caseload of our homicide ASAs has increased by nearly 20%, more than double the caseload recommended by the federal government. Despite this increase, as State's Attorney Mosby pointed out, our office's conviction rates remain high. These conviction rates are due in part to our office's strategic reorganization of its felony trial unit back in 2016 to enhance prosecution of gun, drug, and other felony crimes. The unit was divided into 3 new units: gun violence, narcotics, and felony trial. We also attribute our office's robust pursuit of state and federal grant dollars over the last few years to our successful prosecution efforts. As the state's attorney highlighted, in FY17, our office received 22 federal and state grants totaling about $6.5 million and supporting 74 of the 400 positions within our office. In FY18, these grant dollars will represent about 1/5 or 19% of our office's overall budget. And $5 million of the $6.5 million is dedicated to prosecuting criminals. But this funding is not sustainable. Each year, our Policy and Legislative Affairs Office staff lobbies vigorously in Annapolis to protect this funding, but grants, by their very nature, are never guaranteed as a source of revenue. And if we are ever to lose our grant funding, we would be in jeopardy of losing 28 positions in our homicide, felony trial, and charging units alone, including several of our most experienced prosecutors. Let me go back here to administration. Service number 781. This service comprises about 15% of our FY18 budget and is responsible for monitoring and managing expenditures, grants management, personnel management, policy development, and new project implementation, interagency partnership coordinations, and overseeing and improving information systems to support all of our office's initiatives. It's primarily within this service where we focus our efforts on maintaining good fiscal stewardship, as the state's attorney highlighted, over our city dollars wherever possible. To that end, we recently completed a comprehensive review of office space in the area to determine if we might be able to relocate our offices of the state's attorney to another location where rent cost savings could be realized. After a thorough analysis, however, we've determined that the lease terms under which we're obligated for the next 5 years remain the most competitive around, and that moving locations would likely increase our rent for comparable space by a minimum of $8 to $12 a square foot. Service 781 administration also includes our office's evidence review unit, established in 2016, with which you're very familiar, which is tasked with processing all body-worn camera footage. In April 2017, the evidence review unit reviewed 6,698 pieces of body-worn camera footage, and all budget changes made within this service, if you drill down in the budget book, for FY18 reflect changes made to more appropriately staff that unit. Let me go forward to our last service, 786, the State's Attorney's Office Victim and Witness Services. This service assists victims and witnesses of crime in Baltimore City by providing counseling and guidance, rights notification, monetary support when needed. For victims of crime determined to be at risk of intimidation or retribution, this service provides relocation assistance and other limited forms of support, including food vouchers and travel expenses. As the state's attorney highlighted for you, the increase in crime has significantly increased the demand for relocation services. In 2016, the state's attorney's office relocated a record 131 victims, witnesses, and their families, a number up from 96 in 2015 and 74 in 2014. Unfortunately, while our office has taken steps to constrain spending on relocation by partnering with the Housing Authority to expedite housing vouchers for victims and witnesses, city funding has not kept pace with the increase in demand for relocation services. From FY15 to 17, funding for victim and witness relocation increased just 4%, while the numbers of victims, witnesses, and families that we needed to be relocated increased 79%. In an attempt to offset this staggering increase while continuing to provide much-needed service to support this critical area, our policy and legislative affairs team here again successfully secured significant federal grant funding, specifically the $2.4 million the state's attorney highlighted, to assist with relocation efforts. This 2-year grant supports several new positions within the unit, as well as supporting myriad other operational and programmatic costs. In addition, our policy offered secured 3 new grants that fund 2 social workers to work with survivors of and witnesses to homicide and a human trafficking case manager. But again, it is important to highlight that grant funding is not a sustainable long-term option for maintaining services that meet our office's priority outcome of safer streets. And we know that supporting victims and witnesses is critical to our office's prosecutorial success. This concludes my presentation, but our office is at the ready to answer any questions you may have. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Madam State's Attorney, did you introduce your team or the others, if you could? Sorry, forgot to ask that.
Mr. Chair, this is Shelley Spruill. She is on my policy and legislative team. She is the actual person that is responsible for most of the grants. She and Lisa Smith, who is the deputy director of that division, they are responsible for the $2.4 million grants. They do all of the back end work and the lobbying in Annapolis to ensure that we keep the funding that has been recommended that we no longer have. So I'm extremely grateful for their team. This is my chief deputy, Michael Schatzow, who is over all of the prosecutorial units in the state's attorney's office. This is Darren O'Brien, who is the division chief for our MIS. And Sandy Goldfarb, who is the division chief for our evidence review unit, which is the body-worn camera division. This is Arcelia Green, who is the division chief for victim witness services. And this is Jessica Baldwin, who is one of the community liaisons, new community liaisons for the state's attorney's office, thanks to the collaboration and support of the city council that we were able to re-implement. And then finally, you've met my chief of administration, Camille, from Lake Fall. And I've already mentioned Lisa Smith, who is the deputy director for policy and legislative affairs.
Thank
so
you.
If you have any questions for either of them, we're here.
Thank you, ma'am. Lisa, can you come here for a sec? Council President Young? You're good. Councilman Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam State's Attorney, I want to start by first saying thank you for your service and thank you for all you and all your team do for the city. And thank you for looking into trying to relocate the State's Attorney's office into a place that's more fiscally responsible for the city. As you know, in 2012, I led the charge to try to stop your predecessor from taking the city from paying $0 in rent to $1 million in rent every year when the city's in bad fiscal shape. So thank you for that. My question, first question, is about witness relocation. How much money do you actually need for witness relocation? If you guys had a ballpark figure that you could throw out in the city of Baltimore, where we have homicides right now on pace for the most homicides that we've ever seen in the city, a city that we can transport people around downtown for free on a bus, but we can't seem to dedicate more money to help people who stand up and stand tall for their neighborhoods and their families where people are being killed.
So I met with all of you individually, and what we were requesting, based upon the projections of last year, we overspent $218,000 just on victim witness relocation. So what we attributed this year was a 320 or 350,000. Shelley? It was 350,000. Again, it was in an attempt to be fiscally responsible in light of what we are projecting is going to be in line with what we had last year.
And thank you. And my last question is, I see the changes around the body cameras. Do you anticipate we're going to have to invest more money in that? I know that working with your staff during the creation of the body camera task force, so that was something that we want to make sure.
So I'll actually bring them up, and Sandy and Darren as well. But I don't anticipate that, because we've already made a count of, right? Am I accurate? You are. Come on. You can come up here and he'll
just to
answer
make
you.
sure that we're giving you guys the resources needed to
Absolutely.
deal with it. I know the answer.
Good morning, Sandra Goldthorpe, the Chief of the Evidence Review Unit. We are currently on pace to handle the films that we receive from the Baltimore Police Department. Even though all body-worn camera worn by the police is used throughout the day. What we receive are those that result in an arrestable
Right.
offense. So currently, we are on pace with the current staff that we have.
Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Do add anything else there?
I would. I think the city should prepare for.
Right.
I'm sorry. Darren O'Brien. I think the city should prepare for the continual storage and processing of those, both at the BPD's agency and the state's attorney's office. As this thing grows, that evidence
Cost
needs to be
more.
stored and maintained. And we did projections the best we could at the time, that committee. And I believe those projections are running straight and we're online. But I do believe the police department has 100 plus. The police department has a few hundred more officers to add to cameras. So I think we should be at least anticipating an increase in the storage and maintenance of that footage.
Thank you. And Mr. Klein, I know that we've been monitoring that in the finance department, but also within the police budget. But I think that it will be something that if, and this is a request, Mr. Chair, if we could forecast out totally, let's say for the next 4 fiscal years, what we expect the city to expend on body camera footage. We know that the storage alone is going to be the driving cost, but we should anticipate that so that we're not guessing and coming back with supplementals later in the fiscal years.
We can provide that, Councilman.
That's item number 60. Perfect. One quick point of order, colleagues. I'm going to ask that if you have any questions related to juveniles, that we hold off on those for about 10 or 15 minutes. Should have asked for this before, but I just asked for Gavin Potashik to come join us, because I assume there may be some questions around that. I got a question just in the agency overview. So the FY17 deficit was $450,000. The FY18 deficit is listed at $338,000. Can you talk about what actions you're going to be taking to ensure there's not a deficit in FY19?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you for highlighting the numbers from 17 to 18. You'll notice that there's a decrease in that by 25%, and we are continuing to work closely with our budget analysts to continue to decrease that number. The number reflects simply adjustments made, COLA adjustments, fringe benefit adjustments for our grant-funded staff, but we are working closely to reduce that number each year, and I also want to reduce that number each year so that we sort of get it down to 0 over time.
Got it. And one thing we're asking all agencies, or the larger agencies, can you provide us an updated org chart for
An updated org chart,
Yeah.
sure, yes we can.
And one last thing, when you all filled out this agency detail, did you have an opportunity to review what was the final publishing that Mr. Klein put in the budget book?
We saw it in its draft, sort of a nascent draft form, but by then most of the numbers had been crunched. There were some minor tweaks when it was finalized, but we saw it. We saw an earlier iteration.
But all these narratives came from State's Attorney's Office?
No, those narratives came from the budget office, and we wanted to highlight a couple of discrepancies. You'll notice, for example, on page 499, there's a reference to $10 million secured in FY17 in grant funding. The number is actually $6.5 million. So
I'm not.
in the budget book on page 499, is that the narrative you're referencing?
No, I'm just. No, my issue's with BBMR, not with you.
Oh, okay. So, but what if you could highlight for me your point, the narrative?
No, I'm just curious if the narratives were written by you.
Oh yes, no, they were not written by us. We read them for the first time when the draft budget book was sent to us. They were already compiled.
Got it. Since you brought up the $10 million discrepancy, so it's actually 6.5?
It is.
Okay, got it. Councilman Pinkett?
Since you mentioned those unallocated funds,
Hold on, I can't hear the question.
as it relates to, I guess, grants, what happens if you don't get those grant awards?
Theoretically, not theoretically, actually, if we don't get the grant awards, we are in a position of having to let go those staff unless we have increased funding on the general fund side for employees and fringe benefits. We would have to let them go.
Right. So, Mr. Klein, so I mean, that's a pretty big unallocated fund number. What happens if if those grants don't come through?
We were asking ourselves the same question. Like I said, the policy and legislative team has done a really great job in holding our grant fund steady and in fact increasing it. But if we were to lose it with a change in administration or a change in administration's priorities in Annapolis, we would have to find the money elsewhere, or more than likely we would just have to let the staff go, or make some other internal changes with respect to staffing. But it would very likely include reductions in force.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, I mean, it doesn't seem, that is a very large number to have our public safety hinging on.
Right.
I had another question for the Sheriff's Department related to Service 882, Deputy Sheriff Enforcement. Can you share with us, because it says part of the role is related to evictions, can you share with us what role the Sheriff Department plays in the eviction process? And, are there any measures or reviews associated with that role?
Sure. So the Sheriff's Office is the enforcement arm of the court. So on a order of the court,
I'm sorry, you have to speak to the mic.
on an order of the court, the sheriff will execute enforcement orders. So the first thing that we do in a regular rental eviction is that we'll serve notice that the landlord is filing, and that notice is mailed by the sheriff's office, which is an impartial party, first-class mail to the tenant, and we also, a deputy physically posts that on the door, which is required by law. Once an eviction order has been issued, the sheriff's office then schedules it with the landlord. They have to call in and we schedule it. And the landlord is required to, there's a posting requirement and some other requirements to notify the tenant. Then the sheriff will be present at the eviction. No eviction can occur without the sheriff being present. And if the tenant is present, we'll give the tenant an opportunity to pay if that's available to the tenant. Sometimes by court order they're not, but in the majority of times they are. And the sheriff will ensure that that tenant has the ability to pay out on that. They'll also ensure that the landlord is safe and the property is safe before the landlord goes in, and then the sheriff then performs the eviction and the enforcement of that. So we have a pretty large role in that. It's very similar with the foreclosure process. When we also want to highlight something. When we mail out that initial notice, we also include a pamphlet which gives the tenant their rights and who they can call, such as eviction prevention, legal aid, and that this is an important step and it's the first step, and they need to take it seriously in order to engage the courts if they need to prior to the eviction actually being filed against them.
And so are there ever any complaints filed against the Sheriff's Department in relation to their role in this process? And if so, how do we handle them?
Okay. So the Sheriff's Office goes in front of, the answer is there are very few complaints filed against the Sheriff's Office in reference to the eviction. We're a neutral party. We're not there for the tenant. We're there to ensure that the peace is kept. We act as the peace officer on the scene. If there's a dispute over finances, or I paid, I didn't pay, then the sheriff will actually stop the eviction and send the parties back to court. So there'll be a judicial determination. So there are very few in the eviction side of things and the foreclosure side of things, very few complaints against the Sheriff's Office, if at all. And we are also subject to the Civilian Review Board, such as the Police Department, so the citizens can complain that way. We also have our own Internal Affairs Department, so they can call the Sheriff's Office general number, ask to speak to Internal Affairs, and file a complaint through that way as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam State's Attorney, and your staff for coming out and the great work that you do. I did want to ask, well, one, thank you for sending out staff and helping us to coordinate for the Education and Youth Committee's trafficking hearing a month ago. It was very helpful information, especially a really important issue like that. And I was also encouraged to see that you do have grant funding coming in for a staff member. Could you talk a little bit about what that person's role will be and how long the grant is? Because clearly this is kind of one of those things that's a really important issue that is tied to a grant, and just wanted to kind of see if we could learn a little bit more about that role.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a human trafficking case manager.
What we're doing,
Yeah.
grant.
Right. Thank you so much, Councilman. And we really appreciate your leadership and the members of the subcommittee. It's Councilman Cohen, Councilman Clark, Councilman Dorsey. That was a very fruitful hearing. We really appreciate you starting this dialogue, much needed dialogue in the city. So our office, the state's attorney, has dedicated numerous resources to combating human trafficking and trying to increase the number of cases we're seeing in Baltimore City. In addition to the Special Victims Unit, which has traditionally worked on human trafficking cases and continues to work on the child victim cases, our Major Investigations Unit is now involved, and they've agreed to help with those larger, more proactive investigations. In addition, Gavin Potashnik, who is here, who is our chief of the juvenile division, has done an amazing job getting his staff trained to recognize the signs of human trafficking, and he can speak more on that. I'll let him kind of speak the grant. And specifically, we worked with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice to apply for a VOCA grant, which was awarded and includes a coordinator in City Hall, a human trafficking coordinator at our office, and a coordinator at the Baltimore Police Department. And the ultimate vision is for those coordinators to work together with other law enforcement partners such as FBI, HSI, and the different entities within BPD, SIS, and VICE to all work together to really increase our coordination and increase our prosecution of traffickers.
And how long is the grant for?
The grant is a 2-year grant, although we bumped up the salary a bit, so it'll be at least 18 months. And Gavin Potashnik will actually be overseeing that person. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gavin Potashnik, Chief of the Juvenile Division, Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. How are you?
Hey,
Thank you for inviting me. The Human Trafficking Coordinator position serves 2 functions. One, it involves that individual being able to identify victims of human trafficking as they move through the juvenile system. This is important because what we're finding more and more is that youth who are arrested for crimes that may not seem that significant are actually victims of human trafficking or are actually in the process of being trafficked. What we've been doing in the past is we've been able to identify those victims, being able to leverage the system to try to keep those kids safe, and at the same time alerting our partners, including the FBI, HST, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, to try to see if we can't get these kids help, and to see if they would testify against their abusers. What we're finding is it's difficult to have actual meaningful places for these kids to go to because they run. Human trafficking, unfortunately, is one of those conditions that involves youth not really listen to authority as a source of safety and comfort for those people. So the Human Trafficking Coordinator position serves 2 functions. One is they will identify best practices to identify victims of human trafficking so we can alert our partners in a timely manner. Number 2 is that information will be packaged and sent up through the chain to both our Special Victims Unit, which has human trafficking training, as well as our MIU, which also has human trafficking training. The goal is to try to develop intelligence and information such that we're able to get the people who are perpetrating human trafficking, not just the victims. So it's a new grant, it's an exciting opportunity, and I think it will bring some positive change.
Okay. And that's something that I would imagine you would definitely be trying to seek funding for moving forward after?
Yes, we believe that we can make some great strides within the 18 months that we have left, but I mean, yes, we'd be looking for funding past that date in order to serve that function in the future. We've interviewed a bunch of candidates. We should have a decision soon in terms of who the candidate will be. We'll put them right to work as soon as we get them.
Okay, and what I'll do, he's not here right now, but I guess maybe 6 months or a certain period of time in, we'd like to bring you in to Public Safety Committee or whatever relevant subcommittees to learn more about it and the progress. That way we can continue to highlight that work because it's something that's important to me and members of the committee and trying to coordinate between the BPD, your office, the school system to try and really put the pressure on folks that are trafficking our young people.
Absolutely, and I mean, we recognize too that the problem is growing in the city. It will only grow larger as more casinos and more hotels and more, it will attract more of the bad element that we want to keep out. And remember also that human trafficking is not just the outside individual who is pimping out the individual, but it's also parents of kids who unfortunately sometimes resort to that type of activity. So it also involves a therapeutic measure as well so that we can, try to kind of separate that type of behavior from the youth. Yes, and we're happy to share any information once we do get it with respect to what we do find. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chair.
I have a question on page 504 under Service 781 Administration. Under the change table, it indicates that eliminate funding for 3 assistant state's attorneys positions, which results in $256,800 in cost savings. Yet on the 2 pages later, on page 506, the service salaries and wages for permanent full-time funded positions table, it indicates that the cost savings is actually $157,200.
Mr. Chair, that's just the salary portion on the position table. On the change table, it shows the full cost, including benefits.
Can you explain to me where the benefits are?
Pension, health benefits,
Where, what page are you on?
FICA. They're not broken out. I can break that out for you if you'd like.
So the total savings are $256,000, right? So that's what is that? 85,000 a piece, right? Plus or minus 85K a piece.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on page 506, the salary. So the item there is 157,200. So that's 55,000 plus or minus.
Right, and that would be the entry level
So
salary
that's
for those positions since they're
right.
vacant.
So that's 30K in a piece in benefits. So that comes to a total of 90 plus or minus.
Yeah.
So my question is, where is the difference of $90,000 in the table? Should that be in the change table?
We're just showing the full savings from eliminating those 3 positions. That's what we're showing in the change table, salary plus benefits.
Okay. So what I'd like is can we get a list of all the positions you have eliminated and all of the positions you have added and the salaries associated with each of those positions, please?
We can provide that. We'd have to work with BBMR because those salary savings, those frozen positions typically happen on their end and not on our end, but we can work together to provide you that information.
They're determining what they're being paid, or
Yeah.
HR is?
No, HRIS determines what they're being paid, but in terms of whether or not they're eliminated or frozen, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, so for example, on page 504 under Service 781, you're eliminating 3 assistant SA positions. You're creating 2 law clerk positions, creating 1 chief state's attorney, so on and so
Operations
forth.
officer, right.
Yeah, what I'm asking is, can you provide us a list of each of those positions that you're creating and just what the salary is?
We can.
Not the cost savings, but the position and what the salary is for those that you're creating as well as those that you're eliminating.
We will, but I just wanted to highlight that the decisions, we can provide that number. It comes from HRIS, and that's easy to provide the salary range for these positions. But I guess the point I wanted to highlight or dovetail is that ultimately the decisions about creating and changing or freezing positions is not ours. It's not housed in our office. The budget office of finance makes those determinations based on a broader need, overarching budget, balanced budget need. And so we can absolutely get you that discrete information, but it is part of a larger conversation that we've been having about whether or not they have the authority to do the freezing, whether or not we can participate in the conversation about what's created, what's frozen, those sorts of things.
Do you not get to participate in that conversation now?
I'm going to turn this over to State's Attorney. Not currently.
No.
You don't?
Mr. Chair, these are position changes proposed by the State's Attorney's Office within the current level of service funding that was provided.
So
She's currently, I believe you're referencing the body-worn camera division? Is that what you're referencing? Those positions?
just the
The body-worn camera division, we did eliminate the attorney positions. We thought it was rather fiscally responsible for us to have more bodies in light of rather than have, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but rather than have 11 attorneys that are looking at the camera footage, we've eliminated some of those attorney positions and replaced those with law clerks. So that's the positions in which, those are the only sort of eliminations that we've ever done. With reference to what my chief of administration is talking about, she's talking about the actual salary savings, and budget has gone in on several occasions and unfunded currently filled positions. We don't have any sort of say in that. I think that there was some confusion around that.
Is that your understanding, Mr. Klein?
So we've worked with the State's Attorney's Office over the years, including Madam State's Attorney's predecessor, where what has been happening in State's Attorney is, as they've lost grants, they've wanted to continue services. That becomes a cost to the general fund. And that the agreement has been to hold positions vacant so that that cost is covered.
When you say, so what you're saying is you hold the position vacant
To offset
if and until the
offset
grant
costs
is
that are
ref-
no longer covered by grants.
Right, if and until, if I'm tripping up there, that grant is funded again in the future.
Yes.
No.
I mean, if that grant is funded again, then that provides funding that can be used to fill positions.
Madam State's
So
Attorney.
some of the positions in my office, and maybe that agreement was under my predecessor, but some of those positions within my office are currently filled and they've been unfunded. And we just actually sent a letter to the mayor, and I'll let my chief of administration explain more about that, if you'd like.
So we recently became aware of not only the grants deficit that we have been reducing over time, but also the general policy that has come from the finance department about, and it's probably a longstanding policy to create some salary savings in the budget by freezing positions to offset deficits. The challenge with that is that we find out after we've sort of made it, after we're going down the road of hiring someone, when we identify a need, and then it becomes an issue because we try to open that job number and it's frozen. And we didn't know that it was frozen, and so we are, as the state's attorney and I have both highlighted, trying to be real fiscal stewards about the funds. And so we are each year working very diligently to work with our budget analysts and get the grants fund deficit down, but our general funds ended in 2016 in a surplus of over $100,000. So we are, like I said, I want to reiterate that we are being good fiscal stewards, and we are trying to work through the grants deficit, which we understand for obvious reasons is a priority for the finance department, but freezing our positions as an attempt to do that really puts public safety at risk. And so we've been trying to work closely with Director Raymond and others to see what we might be able to do about that. 14 positions?
The erroneous BPD.
Oh, yes. So a few weeks ago, we became aware that we had this is a slightly unrelated issue, but relevant, so stick with me. So we found out a few weeks ago that we had a deficit, but not on the grant side, on the general fund side. We had a deficit for spending in a line item referred to as other professional services and MIS, so that's Mr. O'Brien's shop. We identified an overage of about $483,000. We were only budgeted about $20,000 in that line item, and so that raises obviously a red flag. You're expending, funds that you do not have. We then realized after some discussion with our budget analyst that in fact those are largely, almost exclusively, and we're still getting the information to him that he needs, but those are largely body-worn camera-related expenses that were put into a line item when, with the expectation that at the end of the fiscal year they would be offset by body-worn camera money that would come from the asset forfeiture funds of BPD. When we figured that out and tried to contact and tried to sort of get resolution and sort of say you shouldn't be freezing our positions to deal with this general fund deficit, notwithstanding the grants fund deficit, because these expenses aren't ours. They were meant to always be borne by the police department. When we reached out to the police department, or when they were contacted, their initial response was, we will not be giving you that money after all. It was a gentleman's agreement from what I can tell. It was decided about a year ago, and so now the time comes for us to offset that money because we're coming to the end of FY17, and we were told that we were not going to get that transfer from BPD's asset forfeiture funds, which the state's attorney immediately addressed by calling the mayor, and we were able to get Director Raymond involved and get a resolution to that pretty expeditiously, because what Director Raymond says, until both agencies figure out where that money is coming from, neither of you can spend anything. None of your invoices can be processed. You can't spend a dime. And so we needed to find a quick resolution because I needed our bills to get paid. And the mayor worked very closely with us, and as did the finance department, to sort of help us resolve it. But that's another example of where frozen positions are being used to offset general funds, grant funds, but in either event, it really it puts us in a bind, because for a period of half a day, I couldn't process any of my invoices, and now I can't fill a lot of the positions that are vital for the effective administration of our office.
Can we go back to what you said at the beginning about, thank you, about whose decision these positions are?
Sure.
Because I feel like there's still a discrepancy with BBMR. Or am I
Yes,
missing
so
something? You guys decide, like on page 504, you made the decision to eliminate 4 positions and create 5 positions, right?
yes,
'Cause you're moving
my
something
apologies for misspeaking earlier. I'm about 4 months into the office, and a lot of this probably preceded my tenure. So yes, we attempted to get a definitive, we attempted to do our due diligence to figure that out. But yes, so I now understand, did agree to make this movement, to move these positions, because a lot of our work are done by law clerks, and assistant state's attorneys are not needed in that role.
I'm not, and sorry to cut you off, I'm not as worried about why you did it. I'm just, my curiosity is piqued as to who made the decision. I'm not getting that far into the weeds.
So that part of it, we made the decision to do. The state's attorney's office made the decision when it came to the body-worn cameras that we were going to utilize law clerks as opposed to the assistant state's attorneys in that capacity. We can get more, when it comes to viewing the film, we didn't necessarily need the attorneys in that role. We do have still, I believe, 4 attorneys. How many? 4 attorneys in the body-worn camera division, and the majority of the individuals that are there are law clerks. So we wanted more bodies, we could review more information. With reference to what Camille was talking about with regard to our other positions, we have not made those decisions. So again, a lot of times we find out that our positions, it's a decision that's being made exclusively by budget, and maybe there was an agreement with my predecessor, but there's been no agreement with us. So we're kind of left, we're interviewing folks, and so it's 2 separate sort of determinations.
Got it. So what you're talking about are positions that BBMR may cut without consulting with you.
Correct.
And you've been in office for 3 years, right?
2 years and 6 months.
Okay, we'll round up to 3.
Feels like 26.
For the sake of conversation. So you've had positions cut that Mr. Klein has unilaterally cut or proposed to cut without being consulted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Klein?
There's been a lot of turnover in the state's attorney's fiscal office. This is the first time that this issue has come up is just in recent weeks. So we worked with the previous state's attorney. They identified the positions. We continued along this path. This is the only way to keep their budget in balance.
Have you had an opportunity to work with the current administration at the state's attorney's office?
Like I said,
Because you keep mentioning previous.
they've been in office 2.5 years, and this issue has only come up in recent weeks. So, we have continued to keep those positions frozen and vacant to offset the grant-related deficit. And until recently, there were no complaints about that.
And did you have positions cut last year by Mr. Klein?
What I can say is that there have been positions, it was brought to our attention this year when we were looking through and we saw positions that are currently filled and they were unfunded completely. We were looking to rehire folks, we were interviewing them, and when we went to fill the position, we were unable to do so. So we had to go through, fiscal and trying to get other job numbers because we had already made the offer to some employees and were unable to hire them. So it wasn't brought to my attention until this year that was what they were doing. They may have been doing it last year. I know that this year it has been a problem. And the reason why I asked Camille to talk about the Baltimore Police Department was because that deficit was being attributed to us, and that was the first sort of rationale that they gave as to why they were freezing and unfunding our positions without our knowledge. They said, well, you have this $433,000 deficit, and we have to attribute for that. When we found out that it wasn't our deficit, it was BPDs, then it became, well, we have to offset the grants deficit from the previous administrations dating back all the way to 2009. Understanding and recognizing that, again, these are really vital roles that have to do with public safety. We brought it to the attention of the mayor. We just recently sent out a letter, and we thought it was important to also bring it to your attention as well.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett?
So just to Mr. Klein, so when making these decisions, it sounds like it's in a vacuum, maybe it's not. Is there consideration to the type of work being done? And so the reason I ask is, so I asked the question earlier about like human trafficking and it being a grant-funded position. Should that grant run out without additional support, are we basically saying that something as vital as that service is just not going to happen for the citizens of Baltimore, and without any real consultation with the office that's losing that position?
Well, first of all, the positions we're talking about were not identified by BBMR. They were originally identified by the state's attorney's office and held vacant to offset this grants deficit. Now, our general policy is if a grant goes away, the service goes away. You know, there can be exceptions to that, and we make those decisions in the budget process, working with our agencies and with the administration.
So that's regardless of the importance or the impact or the measurable outcomes of that role on the citizens of Baltimore?
Well, that would come into play in terms of the priority it would take in finding general fund to make up for loss of grant funding.
Okay.
But as a rule, you know, if the grant funding goes away and it's not budgeted in the general fund, then there's no money for it, and unless, you know, a decision is made to accommodate that service in a future fiscal year within the general fund, then the service would go away.
And that conversation is solely within your office?
I mean, we work with agencies, we work with the mayor's office. We don't make these decisions on our own.
So I just wanted to highlight that I think to pulling up and out a bit, while we can sort of get into the weeds granularly about which positions to freeze, which positions not to freeze, should we freeze them, is there consultation? When it came to our attention that positions had been frozen, and we said, these are vital to our functioning, can you unfreeze them? We were told no. Emphatically no, consistently, repeatedly no. So it might have been that my predecessor identified them last year, but the state's attorney has identified them as necessary this year, and we can't get them. There was also a practice sporadically last year that I've come to understand that sometimes we'd have a frozen position that could still be filled, but which is what happened with 8 of our positions. The position is frozen, but a decision was made that it could be filled. And when the person leaves that frozen filled position, now we can't freeze it. We can't fill it. So that's a mechanism that I'm just trying to wrap my brain around as well. So you have frozen unfilled, frozen filled, you know, frozen vacant. So it's all very nebulous. And in any event, I think it's important to highlight that we are now in conversation to try to unfreeze a lot of these positions that we need, and we've met with real resistance. Again, we want to reiterate, we understand the overarching goal of finance to deal with these grants deficits. We are in line with that. We spend fiscally because of that. We closed FY16 with a small surplus. At the same time, we really do sort of need these positions to be better able to address our public safety, safe streets concerns or objectives.
Thank you. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it seems to me to be almost playing Russian roulette to have these critical city services dependent upon grant funding without, you know, an exit strategy, just in case, you know, those funding, because the position needs to happen, and you all are in a position of, you know, these positions have to continue, you know, so that you are able to meet your mission, whether the grant funding comes through or not. And so, you know, and you aren't the only agency. There are other agencies that are dependent in that way, and we definitely, I believe, need to have a strategy, if we don't already have one, on how to continue these services. But Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Madam State's Attorney, you have a number of community liaisons that work for you, is that correct?
Yes.
That's why I asked that question. How many community liaisons do you have?
We have 9 community liaisons, 1 per police district.
There, and you've had some turnover there. Have you had any difficult?
Yeah,
filling those
a lot of
positions?
the community liaisons were elected to other positions and have elevated their careers in other fields. So,
Have you had
but
any
we have,
difficulty?
they're all filled positions. Like I said, Jessica Baldwin has been a rock star in Northwest District. She's doing very well.
And I guess this also is relative to the last conversation that was happening about having to fill positions with other position names. Can you give me the position line items for those those community liaisons?
The
ones that
position
are being-
line items, I can get
the
back to you
position
and give that
titles.
to you.
Because the budget actually only shows that you've had one community liaison funded.
No, the community liaisons aren't grant funded.
From,
It should be in there because the
maybe I'm
other
missing this. Where
city
can I
council.
see, where can I see the?
Sure,
the
sure. We
community
can look
liaisons
for
in the
you if you
budget?
give me a moment. They're not listed as community liaisons. They're listed as community coordinators. So you see the 6 positions.
Okay.
If you look on page 509,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't list them, and they actually, I'm kind of sad they listed them as a community coordinator as opposed to a community liaison because the band is a lot lower and the salary range is lower for those positions than they were previously. So,
But you do have one community liaison.
Yes.
Do they perform a different job than these?
no, they are, I guess it's a supervisory role. It's one of the former community liaison positions. So if you, under my predecessor, he eliminated all of those positions. What I was able to do and what we were able to successfully do with the former council was to get those positions back. And when we re-implemented those positions, they came in under the grade 90, as opposed to, and I believe it's not in front of me, grade 92, which makes their salary range different. But when they opened it up, that was a position that was still on the books that we were able to utilize.
So, okay, so you have 9, but there are 6 coordinators, 1 liaison, that makes 7.
Uh-huh.
That one is a supervisor of those 6 and 3 others. Where are
I'm not going to, I can get you the exact sort of allocation of their responsibilities. I can't tell you who is in what role as I stand here right now, but I can get you that information.
Okay, so finance you could provide the names of your
Absolutely.
community liaisons to the finance
Absolutely.
department, and they could give us the list of
I can give that to you.
which positions they're filling?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that'll be request number
63.
63.
Okay, no problem.
You've got a couple of graphic artists on staff.
Yep.
What do they do?
We have several homicides. Last year we had 318. They are the ones that help us when it comes to the graphics in court. A lot of times, and I can give Darren, he can come up. He's the division chief for MIS, and he can better explain that for you.
Good afternoon. Absolutely. They are a critical role in presenting our cases to juries. There's a significant amount of evidence, as you know, either DNA, it can range from DNA, it can range body-worn camera, and those graphic designers use particular applications and software to present either hardboards or presentations, either PowerPoint, whatever type of presentation that the ASA may require, those 2 staff present that to them and provide it. It's a critical role. The ASA is constantly prepping the witnesses, the police, whomever it might be, the victims. So we need someone with an expertise to be able to go in. Not all ASAs have the aptitude. So we have these 2 particular staff there constantly. They are working every single day. We try, well, you know, it's 54,000 cases a year, approximately 6,000 new cases in the felony unit, which means they're set for jury trial. So 6,000 cases for 2 graphics designers to help ASAs prep for trial. Very critical.
Thank you. I want to know a little bit more about what the community liaisons actually do.
So what I can tell you about the community liaisons is that they are the face of the state's attorney's office and the voice of the community back to the state's attorney's office. So they attend community association meetings. They are like a liaison for the community. They help with victim impact statements. They follow certain cases. They also help the community prepare community impact statements. They are also providing information back to the state's attorney's office. So through our crime strategies unit, which is modeled after Manhattan Crime Strategies Unit, data-driven prosecution unit, if there are quality of life crimes or issues within various communities, they will bring that to the attention of the state's attorney's office and make that, we can then collectively make that a priority and figure out strategically how we attack those issues or those concerns within that community. They are extremely vital and critical to the state's attorney's office. They help us not only as we ensure this sort of coordination between communities, but they are extremely vital when it comes to even helping our victims and witnesses, in court. They develop a rapport with the community and even planning a number of the events. I know that right now, our community days in court, where we open up the doors of the courthouse every 3 months, and I spoke about it earlier, and we talk about the intricacies of the criminal justice system. The community liaisons are the ones that coordinate those topics based upon the issues within those various communities. So we've talked about juveniles, we've talked about homicides, we've talked about rebounding from a criminal conviction, and we'll be talking about on June 17th, immigration issues in the criminal justice system. Again, those are planned and organized by our community liaisons. So that's just some of the things that they do. And did I miss anything, Jessica?
No, that's pretty good.
Oh, okay.
I've just never seen them in my district.
And I'm sorry. You said what?
Twice, maybe. I've seen a community liaison from your office in my district.
Okay. I'm not certain who is his community liaison.
It was Kenji Scott.
Andrea Curley is very active.
That's right. I've seen each of them once in my district.
Who? Are you talking about Kenji Scott? Because he no longer works for us.
I saw Kenji once, and I've seen Andrea once.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that Kenji Scott is no longer employed in the state's attorney's office, and Andrea Curley has a really fabulous reputation for being extremely involved.
I know her from her previous job in the mayor's office.
She's doing an excellent job in the state's attorney's office as well.
And
I will follow up, and I don't know why you haven't seen her.
If I may say something, not to cut you off, Madam State's Attorney, Councilman, she was at the same community forum that you had that I was at.
That's the only time I've ever seen her in my district.
They have the whole district, not just that one place. Just like our liaisons, they can't be everywhere, and they make as many meetings as they can make.
Thank you, Mr. President.
No further questions.
Thank you.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes, good morning. I'm going to
Morning,
give
Councilman.
Madam State's Attorney a little bit of a breather. I have a question, though, for the Sheriff's Office. So just want to read a little bit about your description and get a little follow-up on this. So just really quickly, I know deputy sheriffs have the authority to enforce criminal law and do so in conjunction with Baltimore City Police Department. And those services can include criminal patrol and crime suppression. Just wanted to find out to what extent that's happening, given that, obviously the challenges we're dealing with in terms of public safety in our city. To what extent is that happening, and do you envision that increasing or decreasing as time goes on?
Great, that's an excellent question, and I'm happy to answer that for you. So we're doing a lot of things to, well, let me talk about what we're doing on a daily basis and the extra things that we're doing. So every deputy sheriff in Baltimore City who's out on the street, who's not in our warrant squad division or assigned to a federal task force, and I'll get back to that because that falls directly in what you're doing as well, what you asked as well, is in full uniform and driving a marked vehicle. And they're out throughout the city every day, and they participate in backing up the police department and general crime deterrence. And through their daily duties, when they're in the area, everyone sees them. And so you may have, and the other council may have seen the sheriff's office presence kind of expand, and that was done because Sheriff Anderson has ordered everyone to wear uniforms and drive marked cars. And when they're in that area, they're reducing crime just by being in that area as the police presence in that area, and they're also reducing crime and reducing fear of the residents because they see them. During the holiday times, during the Christmas holiday and the New Year's holiday, as our court schedule starts to wind down, our deputies were placed out on holiday deployment. So that means that they went to, throughout the city, they went to various shopping areas, they stood on street corners, and they performed patrol functions in doing that. Just recently, our deputies were deployed on Pennsylvania Avenue in conjunction with the police department through one of their crime initiatives. We took our child support enforcement unit and told them you're not going to do between 12 in the afternoon, and by the time you get off, which is half their day, you're going to spend it on Pennsylvania Avenue with the police department and do some foot patrol and walk there. So we do that very frequently. One of the things that we also are doing is we've taken over a lot of the festivals in the city and are acting as the law enforcement presence there. In doing that, we're able to be out in the community. It frees the police department up to do various other functions, and we're able, since we're court-driven and a lot of our people are off on the weekends, we can be reimbursed by the event promoter, just the way the police overtime unit would be reimbursed, and our people on overtime will go out, reimbursable overtime to the city, and not paid for by city general fund revenue, and they'll go out and they'll perform a police presence. We've done that in Fells Point, we've done that in Canton, we've also done that with the Ruth Kirk Festival, and we do that in other areas. We're looking to do something this weekend in Federal Hill, and what that will do is that frees police resources up and also allows us to deploy in a proactive manner into the community where we don't have a lot of presence and people see the sheriff enforcement authority there. In the future, we've always played a role to assist the police department, and we're looking now, and a part of the strategic plan of the mayor and assisting the police department, we're doing some things in the zones that they've determined that they have the highest crime rates throughout the city. The first thing that we've done is we worked with Washington College, which has a mapping program, and we took all the warrants that the sheriff's office holds, which is all the circuit court failure to appear warrants and the circuit court violation of probation warrants, and we asked them to place them into a geographical map so that we can know where all those warrants are, and so we can focus enforcement on there and share that data with the police department. So we can know all the warrants we're holding, are the addresses that the people who have those warrants issued for them in these areas, and can we deconflict with the police department and share that information and try to really focus on enforcement in those areas to try to affect the overall policing strategy. The second thing that we're doing is all of our deputies are notified that these are the zones that are problematic, and they're asked to spend time in those zones and report back every action that we're doing there. So if the deputies go out and they do an eviction in that area, it's noted. If the deputies go out and they serve a peace order or protective order in that area, it's noted. And so we're collecting information so we can kind of share that information with the police department about what our intelligence is and what our actions are, and so we can work in conjunction with them to say, hey, we're going to specialize enforcement in that area. In some areas, we have houses that are up for eviction, that are going to be evicted, that are problems. And it's not just a rental issue, it's a nuisance issue as well, and everyone is aware that this is a problem. And so what we'll do is we'll move that eviction up if we have, so for example, the house was raided and they found a significant amount of drugs in that home, and there's a big push to try to get the residents who are currently in there engaged in, we call community terrorism, in that block out of there. We will move that eviction up if it's a public safety to the first legal available day that we can do that. And so we've shared that with the police department as well. We attend the strategy meetings that the police department has. We've made ourselves available to the mayor. The sheriff has made himself available to the mayor to enforce. We get constituent calls, I'm having a problem here, I'm having a problem there. We act on that. We have assigned one deputy to the Drug Enforcement Administration as a task force officer, so we can vet some of the calls, because people will call to the sheriff's office and they'll give us information, and we forward that through our guy to the police department and also to the Drug Enforcement Agency so they can work there. our deputy sheriffs are special deputized who work warrants with the United States Marshal Service, so they have greater authority there, and they're also notified when violent fugitives from surrounding counties or surrounding states are located in Baltimore. They get notified of that so they can attempt to arrest them to remove that person from our community. We also have someone on assigned as a full-time sergeant from the Sheriff's Office to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms and explosives. And they bring all of that resource back into the city, but they also work in the general policing aspect of the city to try to reduce crime. In the future, we want to continue that role and expand on that role. That's something that we're very interested in doing. I know Sheriff Anderson wants us to do our part, and so when we have incidents in the city, the Sheriff's Office tries to come out and help the best that we can.
No, thank you. That's very helpful information. Just one follow-up. So, do you envision any challenges going forward as you seek to expand that sort of relationship?
I don't. I mean, it's a funding issue, partially. We don't want to run up a huge overtime budget. We have the primary mission of the Sheriff's Office, and that primary mission reduces crime. So the warrant apprehension that we do, the peace and protective order has a crucial domestic violence component, protecting people. Even our civil enforcement makes sure that the rule of law is upheld, and that, again, nuisance properties. And then making sure that people feel safe when they come into the courthouse, and we can have justice in the court facilities because people feel safe while they're in those facilities, all decreases and helps to decrease the crime rate, and is a crucial point. But if we're looking at expanding our role in the things we're doing, it comes down to funding. And we've been very creative at the Sheriff's Office to try to be fiscally responsible in some of the things that we're doing. With our child support unit, again, we have a reimbursement grant, so we have a $1.2 million that comes back to the city through that function. And so our budget hasn't been growing, but we've been growing in our mission because we're being creative and trying to be fiscally responsible and do our share.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Clark.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Sam says.
Thank you.
How many times the sheriff's office has just come through in my district, I cannot even remember. They're so efficient and so, they're like a team. It's like part of the team. I don't know what I'd do without them. I did want to just take this opportunity, so thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a joy to work with you guys.
Thank you.
I just kind of want to address my comments to the Budget Bureau. Let me depersonalize it. The way it's supposed to work is we have a strong mayor form of government, and then the mayor appoints agency heads. And all the years I was around, before kind of lately, what happened was, and it wasn't perfect, but it was years when we went through fiscal crisis like the late 80s, where it was every bit as much a recession as we just came through. Are we through it? Lately. What happened would be, okay, so the mayor would be, with the budget, would begin to meet with the heads and people of city agencies. And it would be not like some hearing, it would be like around the table, like, what's going on, what do you need, how's it going, we got a problem, we're going through this, that, and the other thing, how can we do it with your agency? And so the agency people, and the director, like in this case, the state's attorney, would be involved with her people, and they would go back and they would come back. In other words, they would then go back and say, how are we going to meet these concerns? How do we do this? And from that evolved the first version of this that comes from finance, well, this is the second version, and goes to the Board of Estimates. And then things would happen with the city council, et cetera, and now the council would get involved. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, and that's life in the city council. But it wasn't that the Budget Bureau made agency policy. It was that the Budget Bureau accommodated agency agency policy while the agency looked at its options for accommodating a budget situation that the city was undergoing. To me, it is disrespectful and upside down for any agency head, and this is not the only case, to not even know why something's in deficit or isn't in deficit or a position is frozen. That's not acceptable governance. And what it means is that agency heads are minimized in a process in which the only thing that matters is the budget. The budget is a means to an end. The agencies are the ones who carry out the work of the city. The Budget Bureau has its role, but not as substitute mayor. So I just think it's very, very serious, and it's been going on a long time. Like, just to bring up a much smaller issue, but huge to me, every year, the health department puts money in the budget for school-age child care center at Waverly and Northwood Elementary middle schools. And every year, it doesn't make it into the, last year it was $167,000 for 80 slots for kids to have full-time daycare in their school and all summer long. And so it doesn't make it into the book that goes to the mayor. Now, it did this time, but it wasn't supposed to. It wasn't there. It came from the agency to finance. It did not get in the book, but the mayor put it in. And so it did come into this book. But in this book, the authors of the verbiage have said, won't happen again, no more after now. And we'll have to fight again to keep a program alive that cost $178,000 this year for 40 slots so kids can have families who go to work and don't worry all day about it. That's not how we should be doing it. It should be the agency directors, not some panel from here and there and the other place who sits around and votes on things they don't know about, and then that's what becomes a finance report. But the agency heads should be the ones working with the mayor, as was always the case, and finance taking notes, not vice versa. And until that gets straightened out, we're going to have all kinds of problems. We have problems anyway, but that's making more of them. Thank you. Oh, and I would like to know at least what, and I know I should, what the ask is from the state's attorney of the city council.
Yes, and as we discussed, Councilwoman Clark, we will certainly get that information to all of the members. That's no problem at all. I believe we circulated that previously, but it was a while ago, so.
And if you can't afford it, just put it on our tab.
So just be clear, Councilwoman Clark, so because we're tallying the questions, is this, can you restate the request? The request as far as I think you said we need another ask.
Yes, I know it's, we've probably all seen it, but, you know, we probably lost it. What is the ask of this city council about the state's attorney's budget? We know, you know all about our limited powers, yada yada, but what do you want if you had your druthers, and for what issues?
Again, this is something that we've distributed. We have no problem. We'll redistribute it. We were focusing on $350,000, which was our top priority, was for victim witness relocation. Again, that was fiscal responsibility, understanding that we overspent last year. The other sort of request was the diversion program, and we're actually attempting to find some sort of external resources, the
Yeah,
juvenile diversion program, which was previously funded through MLCJ and unfortunately was unfunded. We're saying we'll take that on because it's such an important program. We have to ensure that those nonviolent youthful offenders we divert them and they don't get into the DJS system. And then the other was pertaining to a number of the MIS and updates of our computer system. If you can imagine, I think our computers are outdated by more than 7 years. So we were asking for funding with regard to that. So I think the total was like 829,000. But Councilman Pinkett brings up a really, really good point about us having a strategy. Again, we've made all due diligence in finding, attempting to find places outside of the 120 East Baltimore for our office space to no avail. But we need to develop a strategy because we get more than $5.5 million from the state, which funds our war room. And our war room, which is our 24-hour sort of service that we provide, is, these are some of our, 19 of our more experienced prosecutors that are under a grant. And every year, and this is what we really need to bring to the attention of City Council, the recommendation from the legislative analyst has been that this should fall on municipalities, not on the state. And that we should, this grant that they give to Baltimore City, they say every year, why are we giving Baltimore City so much money? We have crime too. And we have to go down there and we have to fight this every single year for the past 3 years. And I think that you're absolutely right. We need a strategy because this is a critical and vital sort of need in the state's attorney's office.
So what's the number?
Thank you, Madam State's Attorney. I would just, I know that this is not for you, but this is for anybody in the state legislature that is listening. Well, maybe they should pay for it since the police department is their agency and not the city's.
It's a good one.
Duly noted.
Do we know what? I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, noted.
Duly noted.
The councilman's
I
comment.
thought you said, do you know it?
No. So I think you've addressed Councilwoman Clark's question,
Right.
concern.
That request,
But-
829,000, and then a strategy in place for the war room, just long term. We'll attempt to keep getting those funds, but it's not guaranteed.
Okay, and so we'll note that as question 64 and make certain that information is distributed to all of the council persons.
Thank you.
Councilman Stokes?
Madam State's Attorney, I just want to, I'll support the budget. I think we always hear about we can't arrest our way out of what's happening in the city, so I think that money that you're requesting is a need. I attended your community day in court. I think your staff is doing a wonderful job, so
Thank you,
I just wanted to
Councilman.
share that with you, and I want to share with the sheriff's office who have been helping me in terms of some crime in the 12th district, and the sheriff reached out, and when I asked him, there was no hesitation. So your staff and tell Mr. Anderson they're doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Councilman Burnett?
Thank you. This is directed to the Sheriff's Department. So I actually wasn't aware that there was as much collaboration as you described with BPD. Is there, so now I have opened up a lot more questions. So your role, how many sheriffs are there in the city?
So there's approximately 113 deputy sheriffs in the city, and then we also have a court security agency, and so we have court security officers as well. And those court security officers' primary role is it would be like if you consider them the circuit court police department. So the deputies are the ones who are not only in court, but they also have the full jurisdiction to move throughout the city.
So the line of questioning I'm asking is around, so you mentioned doing foot patrol and providing additional support. Is that something that varies depending on the district commander as far as them asking for that collaboration? I'm trying to figure out what that looks like. And the reason I'm asking is, I'm sure all of us at this table get constant calls for wanting more of a police presence, more visibility, especially on areas that there are open air drug markets. And so really my questioning is around, is that something that you know, you seek out to help out on, or is that something that maybe a district commander is, you know, typically would make the ask and maybe others don't? Just trying to figure out how that communication flows.
Sure. So let me answer the question by saying this: that the sheriff's office has a primary mission, and there are times that we're able in the short term to deploy to assist, like for a surge.
Okay.
So a district commanders have in the past, like the Northern District Commander would ask us around the holiday time to go up on Greenmount Avenue and patrol there. And it's also based on the availability of the deputies. If there's a high-profile court case, or if there's a lot of work coming in and we're getting slammed in other areas, we have that primary mission that we have to take care of.
Sure.
But our mission is we are a law enforcement agency, and so, you know, if there are things to be brought to our attention, if there are problem areas, we share that with our people. And when they're out in the street, they're supplementing the law enforcement that is present within the city of Baltimore. So we have some specialized units. So if you have a specific concern that you have, we can vet it to our specialized units in alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and the Drug Enforcement Agency, and some short-term things that we're able to do. And I think that's the answer. But we're certainly not a replacement for the police department.
Yeah.
They have the prime. But we can enhance their efforts if we're aware of it, and we can plan for it. We could do some staff, and we can do some proactive things.
Okay. Yeah, I'll reach out offline, and because I guess that there's definitely some shortfalls that I know we experience in the Southwest, and if there's opportunities to push more collaboration, I want to try and facilitate.
Well,
that.
there are deputies throughout the entire city every day, and so it's good to let them know these things so they can pay special attention.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, thank you, Madam State's Attorney, and your team. Thank you, Officer Kogan from the Sheriff's Department. Thank you, Mr. Klein. This hearing is in recess until 1 p.m. when the session topic will be workforce development. Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Sam Cogan's a great person.
Marguerite keeping me straight.
You're a great person to know.
Oh, thank you. That you say that because you're buds with all my kids and grands.
I'm ready to go. Needed that.
No, I know. I don't want the police department to get mad. I'm saying, no, there's always.